Now, the great irony of today is that amid reports of better news on the coronavirus front and even suggestions that Plan B may be lifted by the end of this month and that we are edging back to normal, the Prime Minister's problems deepen. More opinion polls suggest that the Tories now have a double-digit deficit behind Labour and that Mr Johnson himself is unpopular, distrusted and certainly no longer the top choice of most people to be Prime Minister. So today I'm asking how we got here. And in short, are Boris Johnson's problems about parties, policies or the press? To many, it doesn't get much worse than seeing a Prime Minister having to apologise to Her Majesty the Queen for parties in number 10 Downing Street on the eve of her late husband's funeral. The news that there were parties or drink sessions pretty well every Friday and that the senior civil servant who drafted the COVID restrictions also hosted a leaving party seem almost minor revelations. And there's probably more to come, as a cursory glance of the newspapers today confirm. Put simply, folk are curious that while they restricted themselves as instructed, the people who'd issued those instructions hadn't. They worked for the Prime Minister. He set the tone, and it looks pretty bad. Equally interesting is to consider policies. Do his problems actually stem from what the Prime Minister has come to stand for on policy? Well, the Daily Telegraph, for whom Mr Johnson, of course, once worked, has a leading article today suggesting that the Conservatives need to get back to a mantra of low tax, low spending, freedom-loving policies. They think that Mr Johnson has drifted away from them, and they publish a lengthy interview with Lord Frost, conducted by my GBNews friend Liam Halligan. When Lord Frost resigned, he made it clear the drift from those policies was his main reason for going. Elsewhere in the Telegraph, Charles Moore suggests that Boris Johnson is still the only man who's got it and that the party should stick with him. But the message is clear. He needs to get back to those core Tory beliefs as far as the Telegraph's concerned. Finally, there is the press itself, more generally, and the role that it has played in all of this. Now, I'm conscious that I'm going out on a limb on this, but sometimes that's a good place to be. I'm also deeply conscious of the fact that GBNews is a newcomer to the whole world of media, and that we are not frightened to take a stand on issues. Now, bit by bit, this story has emerged. A culture of superiority at number 10, of untouchability, these young masters and mistresses of the universe at the dizzying heights of political influence, feeling that they were simply above the tedium imposed by them and their masters on the rest of us. From giggly rehearsals of televised press conferences to crass bring your own bottle or booze emails, it went from bad to worse. Ordinary folk wrote and spoke of what they'd been through at the same time as these parties rocked and rolled, of missed funerals, of lost farewells, of personal isolation and vulnerability, while the bright young things had fun as if it was a great Gatsby knees-up with DJs and suitcases full of booze. And all of it at the heart of government, a government that had virtually read the Riot Act to the rest of us. But how much of these revelations result from good old-fashioned journalistic digging, and how much of it came from men and women with grudges, settling old scores? How much of it is a media that hates Boris Johnson, hated his victory in the Brexit referendum? How much of it is a Tory press that wants a different Tory at the helm? And how much comes from a media that deep down simply wants a Labour government again? How much of it is former advisers themselves, far from being without sin, just settling grievances? Revenge is sweet, but democracy is precious. Are we being played by a media that has its own agenda, by people who will do anything for a good story, lots of viewers and readers, and lots of likes on Twitter? So there you have it. He is in trouble for sure. But is it parties, policies, or the press, or perhaps a toxic cocktail of all three?